I am the most favored concubine in the Eastern Palace. Though my background is humble, the Crown Prince cherishes me like a pearl in his palm, and the only child is also mine. Gazing at the sleeping faces of the father and son, I feel that my blessings are yet to come. Suddenly, my son opens his eyes. Mother, I have been reborn. Father will raise an army to usurp the throne in 3 months, and the first one he will kill is you. Hello, everyone. Welcome to my channel. Subscribe us to read wonderful stories every day. Now the story begins. This child, why is he talking in his dreams? I helplessly tucked the little hand that was tugging at my sleeve back under the quilt, a pull, and it actually didn't move. Mom, I miss you so much. His voice was as faint as that of someone long ill, yet he held on to me tightly without letting go. The once innocent and lively child before bedtime now seemed greatly frightened, his lips trembling, his eyes completely bloodshot. I was afraid of disturbing the resting Crown Prince Chi-Ku, so I quickly signaled Yua to keep quiet and carried him out of the bedchamber. Mother, everything I said is true. Before I could step out the door, Yua hurriedly defended herself. The 2-year-old's words were jumbled and unclear. I listened patiently for a long time before I could roughly understand what she meant. He said Chi-Ku would raise an army to usurp the throne in 3 months, and that very night I became a corpse. I hid behind the rockery and saw my father come out of my mother's room. Mother was carried away, her face blue and purple, with blood at her nose and the corners of her mouth. A few days later, we moved to the Imperial Palace. They told me to call my father Imperial Father and forbade me from ever mentioning my mother again. Yuana recounted every word, afraid that I wouldn't believe him. Of course I wouldn't. Who doesn't know that the Crown Prince and the Crown Princess are only pretending to get along? The most favored in the Eastern Palace is Ziyun, the concubine the Crown Prince met among the common people. Though my status is not high, Chi-Ku holds me dear, and my daily provisions and treatment are almost on par with the Crown Princess's. How could he possibly kill me? Yuan continued on her own, but father changed. He rarely came to see me, and later, Yuan fell ill, a very, very serious illness. I was startled. There isn't a mother under heaven who wouldn't feel her heart ache upon hearing her child is ill, even if it's in a dream. I instinctively followed Yuana's words and asked, "Ill, and your father? Didn't he call the imperial physician to treat you?" He lowered his head, looking even more dejected. "Father and the imperial physician are both at Consort's palace. I heard she's going to give me a little brother." Consort, in the Eastern Palace. Besides me, there is the Crown Princess, who will naturally become the future empress. But who is the noble consort? Is the noble consort from this household? I pressed, but Yua just shook her head. The nanny covered my mouth, not letting me call for mother, but I was so cold all over, I couldn't help it. He clung tightly to my neck, his little hands icy, murmuring. I called and called, and then I really saw mother. My nose tingled with emotion, and I patted his back, soothing him repeatedly. "Don't be afraid, don't be afraid. You had a nightmare, it's all right." I placed the tearful Yuan back in her small bed, feeling an inexplicable unease in my heart, but as my gaze swept over the pearl headpiece on the table, I laughed at myself for worrying over nothing. This headpiece was a gift from the palace. By rights, it should have gone to the Crown Princess, but Chi-Ku simply said, "The pearls are bright and vibrant, they suit Ziyun better," and had it sent directly to my room. Chi-Ku also adores Yuan deeply. The father and son are practically inseparable all day long. What poisonings and premature deaths, mere child's talk. I lay down beside Chi-Ku, somehow unable to sleep soundly. In a drowsy haze, faint murmurs drifted in from the outer hall. I suddenly awoke, reaching out to find no one by my side. "Your Highness, the death squad has been recruited and is all stationed outside the camp in the capital's outskirts. I am still working on winning over the Imperial Guards." It was Han Li, the commander of the Eastern Palace. "How much longer?" Chi-Ku asked. "About 3 months. Han Li paused. "Forgive my bluntness, but the Crown Princess's family is the Duke of Su, who commands a powerful army. Why not seek help from your father-in-law instead of taking the risk of raising a death squad and bribing the Imperial Guards yourself?" After a moment of silence, Chi-Ku chuckled very softly. "Have you ever considered that the Duke of Su, a man of 3 generations of loyal service, might be unwilling to join my cause?" By the time Chi-Ku returned, my back was soaked with sweat. "Ziyun," he called my name gently. "Your eyelashes are fluttering like butterfly wings. Did I wake you?" I rubbed my eyes, pretending to have just woken up, and complained, "Your Highness, you're so cold, how could I not wake up?" Chi-Ku stretched out his long arm and pulled me back into his embrace. "Then warm me up," he said, burying his head in the crook of my neck. his cool nose like the restless tongue of a little animal. The room was filled with a lingering charm, just like countless nights I had spent with him. As my name suggests, I was not a daughter from a respectable family. I was originally a singing girl by the Xuanyang River, who boarded a painted boat full of distinguished guests under the madam's repeated instructions. I had intended to serve carefully, but unexpectedly ended up blocking an arrow shot from nowhere for Chi-Ku. Heaven is my witness. I lunged forward at that moment solely to grab the jade Rui scepter from the hands of the Xuanyang prefect. Whoever held it would claim it. It was only later that I learned the elegant young gentleman I had pushed aside was none other than the Crown Prince of the realm. The Crown Prince. Who would dare to assassinate the Crown Prince? I asked in disbelief, both flattered and startled, as I sipped the medicinal broth from his spoon. Naturally. It would be my dear brothers who wished to be Crown Prince themselves. Chi-Ku set down the medicine bowl, his eyes icy cold. The bonds of imperial blood are no match for the kindness of a courtesan. I stole a guilty glance at him, secretly delighted at my stroke of luck. It was all because of Yuana's nightmare. Otherwise I wouldn't have tossed and turned, nor would I have overheard his conversation with Han Li. Yet that conversation coincided exactly with Yuan's nightmare. For several days, I maintained a calm facade while my heart pounded incessantly. Though young, Yuan had an old soul. She gradually cast the nightmare aside and resumed her carefree daily play. Miss Ziyun, the maid Baoyan's sudden cry made me stumble. The young prince has offended the crown princess. You must come quickly. Next month, Chi-Ku's esteemed mentor, Elder Shui, is returning to the capital. He plans to invite the Shui family to the residence for a welcoming banquet, and the crown princess has been busy preparing the feast these past few days. Yuan has always listened to me and kept a respectful distance from this stepmother, so how could she have offended her? I rushed into the garden to find Yuan apologizing helplessly, while the crown princess ignored her. Bending over to inspect the crooked and disheveled orchid stems, playing handball without watching where you're going. These jade orchids were carefully tended by the young lady for months, meant to be gifted to the women of the Shui family. The round-faced maid, Yueying, who had accompanied the crown princess as part of her dowry, scowled at me, her expression darkening further upon my arrival. Lady Ziyun, how timely of you to show up. Could it be that you and your mother staged this entire act yourselves? His Highness forbade you from attending the family banquet. If you have grievances, you should take them up with him. The crown princess adores orchids. How could you vent your anger on her flowers? Yueying planted her hands on her hips, emphasizing the words family banquet with a sharp tone. She thought I was picking a fight over it. Indeed, Chi-Ku never hesitated to show his favoritism toward me, taking me along to many occasions where concubines were not typically permitted. This time, however, was different. Why won't you let me and Yuana go? I pretended to be upset, thinking she was joking. After all, it was because of old Shui that I even got to know His Highness. A flicker of impatience crossed Chi-Ku's face. He closed the poetry collection in his hand, his expression returning to normal. My former mentor once held the position of Grand Tutor and was also an old friend of the Yi family. I fear that seeing you and Yuana would only bring them unnecessary displeasure. The connections and interactions among prestigious families are like century-old trees, while I am but a drifting duckweed. Even with the Crown Prince's favor, I could never truly blend in. Someone like me, who rose from selling smiles, has the sharpest eyes and ears, so I tactfully agreed, though in truth, I hadn't given it much thought. Chi-Ku was the legitimate son of the Empress, yet he did not win the Emperor's favor. After the Empress passed away, the then Grand Tutor Shui became his only remaining support, and also a thorn in the eyes of others. Grand Tutor Shui soon fell from grace over trivial matters, was stripped of his official position, and expelled from the capital as a commoner. For this, Chi-Ku spoke disrespectfully and angered the Emperor, resulting in the revocation of his regency authority and his banishment to the remote Xuanyang to manage the troublesome local affairs that even officials found overwhelming. Under the guise of training, it was actually to make him commit a mistake, so as to justifiably depose the legitimate heir and establish a concubine's son. The arrow that pierced my right shoulder was likely from his brothers, who couldn't wait any longer and sought wealth through danger. Chi-Ku spent his days and nights in Xuanyang in constant anxiety, seeing assassins in everyone, and could only fall asleep each night by holding me close. At the start of spring, Han Li came rushing in with exciting news. The Duke of Su says his only daughter has taken a liking to your highness. The Emperor has already granted the marriage, and we can return to the capital. I've heard Chi-Ku say that the Yi family has been leading troops for generations, with illustrious military achievements. If the Duke of Su had a son, he would have found the dragon throne too hot to sit on. With the Yi family choosing him, the crown prince position won't be changed anytime soon. Yet Chiku's expression wasn't as relieved as one might expect. He stood with his hands behind his back, gazing into the distance, and let out a dry laugh. The Duke of Su really knows how to pick his moment, offering help in times of need in exchange for my future gratitude. But whoever asked for my consent? Han Li hesitated for a moment. You mean Lady Ziyun, you're returning for the grand wedding, and bringing her along? Outside the door, I froze, my breath catching at his words. I had originally come to tell him that I was 2 months pregnant, seeing my chance to escape my lowly status slipping away. I stepped into the hall, knelt down sorrowfully, and pleaded, I know I am unworthy and lack fortune, but I am carrying your highness's child. I beg you to let me stay by your side. I am willing to serve you and your future wife as a humble maid. Chiku ignored Han Li's meaningful glance and reached out to help me up. Nonsense. My marriage to the Yi family is merely an alliance. You need not concern yourself with her from now on. He gently brushed away the tear I had deliberately let fall at just the right angle, yet a fleeting chill passed through his tone. True to his word, Chiku treated me with the same affection as before after returning to the capital. Even earning himself the reputation of doting on a concubine and neglecting his wife. At first, I feared every day that Crown Princess Yi Qingshuang would come to cause trouble. Fortunately, noble women of high status possess extraordinary magnanimity, and we managed to coexist peacefully all along. But these jade orchids must be truly precious. She, who is usually as composed as a lady in a classical painting, now has a furrowed brow and beads of sweat on her forehead, knowing I was at fault. I timidly said, How many orchids did Yuan ruin? I'll send someone to buy new ones right away. Yuing shot me an unamused glare. A single jade orchid is worth 100 gold coins, and these are tribute items from the southern province. I'm afraid they're priceless and impossible to replace. I turned to Baoyang. Take that set of pearl headpieces, convert them all into silver, and give it to Aunt Li from the kitchen. Tell her to handle this urgently. Baoyang looked completely bewildered. So I nudged her. Weren't you just complaining the day before yesterday that Aunt Li's younger brother is a flower farmer, and she's been asking around everywhere, hoping to secure the contract for the Eastern Palace's seasonal flowers? Baoyang suddenly understood, slapping her forehead. Yes. It's so thoughtful of you to remember, Miss. Yi Qingshuang slightly raised her eyes, and seeing that I didn't seem to be pretending, her brows relaxed a little. She counted them. All right. 6 plants. I quickly curtsied and, as if granted a great pardon, dragged away Yuan, who looked as wilted as frostbitten eggplant. I shoved the pearl headpiece into Baoyan's hands. She was still in a daze. I thought the crown princess would seize the chance to make a scene. Just like this. Are your eyes just for breathing? She was clearly only worried about her orchids and didn't even spare me a second glance. The more I thought about it, the more it stung. I gave the culprit, Yuan, a hard pinch. Baoyang tucked away the pearl headpiece and curled her lip. They all say the crown prince doesn't fancy the crown princess, but it seems to me she isn't all that fond of him either. I suddenly reached out and pressed my finger to her lips. Yes. No discussing the master and mistress, no stirring up trouble. Baoyang parroted the words I often repeated, lifting the curtain and stepping out. The crown prince shows favoritism. The crown princess is magnanimous. If it weren't for Yuan's strange remarks, I would truly think I had cultivated blessings over several lifetimes. Yuana, with her little face flushed from my pinching, held back her tears and nestled close to me. Mother, I won't go near those flowers anymore. Please don't abandon Yuana again, you little rascal. I pulled him into my arms, a sudden surge of strength rising within me amid days of anxiety and confusion. Whether it's rebirth or a nightmare, the uprising in 3 months is what I heard with my own ears. I can't control the outcome, but no one should think they can take the lives of me and my child in the chaos. But why did Chiku want to kill me? Could it be related to that imperial consort? I was lost in my own wild thoughts, with no clue at all. The Shui family was only allowed to return to the capital this time under the pretext of seeking medical treatment, and as soon as they entered the city, they were taken into Chiku's residence. I spent time with Yuana in the study, avoiding the crowd and not forcing myself to join the excitement. I pulled out a collection of poems that Chiku often held in his hands and was about to open it when footsteps approached from outside the window. It was Yi Qingshuang leading the Shui family to see the jade orchids. Yuana and I huddled by the window, craning our necks to peek. Chiku supported elder Shui with his left hand, while on his right were the eldest son of the Shui family and his wife, The couple chatted and laughed with Chi-Ku from time to time, showing great familiarity. Yi Qingshuang followed behind, holding hands with the young lady of the Shui family, engaged in lively conversation. Alas, most children from noble families have known each other since childhood. With a mother like me, who has no family background, it's been hard on Yuana. Suddenly, Yuana darted behind me and wrapped his arms around my legs. Your Highness, the imperial consort has arrived. My hand trembled, and a yellowed paper-cut portrait slipped out from the poetry collection. It looked exactly like the woman laughing and chatting outside. The Shui family had been in the mansion for 18 days. For 18 days, I haven't seen Chi-Ku once. Even Baoyang muttered that even if old Shui had once mentored and supported Chi-Ku, there was no need for him to stay by their family's side day and night. I absent-mindedly embroidered the undergarments for Yuan, unable to shake off the words I had overheard the day before yesterday. With Chi-Ku absent for so many days, Baoyang was even more anxious than I was, insisting that I go and deliver some ginseng soup. My dear, how can you be so clever at times and so foolish at others? She pulled me away from Yuanyuan's bedside and thrust the food box into my hands. What good does it do to hover around the child all the time? The crown prince's favor is your only hope. He will have a harem of wives and concubines in the future. If you don't strive to become a consort now, are you going to wait until you're old and faded, forgotten by him? Holding the food box, I stood hesitantly at the door of the diligence hall, unsure whether to advance or retreat. Chi-Ku had always disliked being disturbed while handling affairs, and there were very few attendants left in front of the hall of diligent governance, but that small portrait burned me like a ghostly flame, making me restless and desperate for confirmation. Creak, the window lattice was pushed open, and I slipped behind a pillar, my heart pounding like a thief's. A long, satisfied sigh from Chi-Ku echoed from within. Elan, every day and every night, I wish it were you before my eyes, through the crack in the window. Chi-Ku fiddled with the silky hair entwined around his fingers and whispered, you and I grew up together, how could you not understand my feelings? I married Lady Yi solely to secure my position in the Eastern Palace, so that in the future I can ascend the throne, clear my mentor's name of the charges, and bring you back to the capital. The woman sitting on Chi-Ku's lap looked up, her eyes misty with tears, her lips swollen like ripe cherries. It was none other than the noble consort identified by Yuan, Miss Shuilan of the Shui family. I felt as if struck by a blow to the head, nearly dropping the food box. Could it be that Yuana's rebirth was not just a child's fantasy, and that Chi-Ku had actually been involved with Shuilan all along, which is why he immediately made her his noble consort after ascending the throne? But what does that have to do with me? Shuilan sniffled. But I'm afraid you might take the act too seriously and develop real feelings for Sister Yi. Forgetting about Elan who is suffering in that harsh, cold place, she then lightly punched Chi-Ku's chest. Brother Ku, that desolate place is simply uninhabitable. I can't stand it for even one more day. Chi-Ku grasped her hand and said in a low voice, don't worry, I have a plan. Once the great matter is accomplished, I will bring you into the palace with all the glory you deserve. You always know how to sweet-talk me. Shuilan leaned into his embrace. I've also heard that there is a highly favored concubine in the Eastern Palace. Chi-Ku stiffened, pursed his lips, and said, she's just a songstress. I only treat her like feeding a stray cat or dog on the roadside. You need not concern yourself with her. I originally used her to suppress Lady Yi first, to prevent the Duke of Su from thinking I'm easy to manipulate and would repay a favor with undue demands. And second, so that if Lady Yi becomes jealous and causes a scene, coupled with her lack of an heir, the court officials will have nothing to say when I depose her as empress in the future. Shuilan gasped softly, her face filled with alarm. Deposing the empress? Wouldn't that be too cruel to Sister Yi? Chi-Ku gently tapped her nose and said with a laugh, you, always so kind-hearted, I nearly forgot that you and Lady Yi are close friends from your inner chambers. But if my teacher hadn't been demoted because of me, the position of crown princess would have been yours all along. Moreover, the Yi family is backed by the Duke of Su, who holds military power. I don't want to be constrained by others all my life like my father was. When the time comes, I will inevitably reclaim that military authority. I felt a chill in my heart. Yuana had only told me before that after he entered the palace with Chi-Ku, he never saw his stepmother again. I didn't find it strange. Yi Qingshuang had no connection with me to begin with, and as the daughter of a high-ranking official and the mistress of the central palace, it would be odd if she bothered with him. Now it seems that Yi Qingshuang was already in dire straits herself. My sudden death was most likely the first move in a scheme to frame her and the Yi family. I stumbled back to the West Garden, grabbing Yuan, who had just gone to bed, in your dream. What happened to the crown princess later? He was dazed and confused, and what he said was no different from before. Before my mother died, the legal wife was already imprisoned. Pressed by my repeated questions, Yuan seemed to recall something else. Later, the emperor said she was jealous and vicious, had taken lives, and would never see her again. He only waited for the noble consort to bear children before making her empress, so it was indeed true. I steadied myself by holding onto the bed rail, barely managing to stand. I was well aware of the vast difference in status between Chi-Ku and me. I also understood what the uprising 3 months later meant. The crown prince, fearing delays might complicate matters, intended to raise troops and usurp the throne, a crime of rebellion that, if successful, would secure his position, but if failed, would result in the execution of his entire clan. Even so, I never once considered the idea of reporting his secret escape. I dared not hope to share a life of mutual respect and harmony with him. But since he rescued me from the world of pleasure and allowed Yuan to grow up in luxury, we should at least share both fortune and misfortune. How ridiculous. I thought I had encountered a noble benefactor and that endless blessings lay ahead, never imagining that from beginning to end, I was merely a discarded pawn at the fingertips of a powerful figure. The carved railings and jade inlays of the west courtyard suddenly transformed into an inescapable net. I couldn't help but shiver. What should I do? Should I run? I've been kept by Chi-Ku in the Eastern Palace, not even knowing which way the capital's gates open. Taking Yuana with me would make escape impossible. Besides, ever since my father sold me to the brothel, I've had no home to return to. Where would I even run to? If I don't run, can I really change the outcome? But behind this outcome lies the cunning of the court and the struggles of the powerful. I learned to read and write from indecent verses and flirtatious poetry. What else do I know besides being beautiful, having a sweet voice, and knowing how to please others? Or perhaps I should try harder to please Chi-Ku, hoping to earn a shred of his pity, but with my worthless life exchanged for the charge of the Yi family's only daughter being unvirtuous, immoral, and even poisoning a favored concubine. Chi-Ku truly has no reason to show any pity. Hiss, the sewing needle pricked my finger, jolting me back to awareness. Baoyan's urgent voice gradually became clear. Miss Ziyun, stop daydreaming. The crown princess summons you to pay respects. On our wedding night, Chi-Ku spent it with me, and the next day he personally exempted me from serving tea and paying respects to the crown princess. At that time, I was still flattered, unaware that I was merely bait on a hook, meant to provoke Yi Qingshuang into biting in a fit of rage. Yet Yi Qingshuang readily agreed, and from then on, we kept to our own separate ways. Why on earth was I summoned to pay respects today? With a sense of unease, I made my way to the east courtyard, a place I had never set foot in before. Before I even reached the door, I heard a sharp, haughty reprimand. A mere concubine, how dare you disregard the crown princess and fail to come pay your respects? Shuerilan sat upright in the main seat of the hall, as if she were the true mistress of this household. Sister Yi is too kind-hearted and easily bullied. Today, I will help her seek justice. The maids and servants of the eastern courtyard exchanged uneasy glances. Yuing murmured, His Highness permitted her not to come, saying she is with child and need not observe empty formalities. The crown princess also forbade us from complaining about it. Shuerilan snorted coldly. Someone of her status is unworthy of raising the crown prince's firstborn. In my opinion, the child should be taken and placed under Sister Yi's care. Stop standing there. She caught sight of me at the doorway from the corner of her eye, her demeanor growing even more imperious. Today is the anniversary of the late empress's passing. The crown prince and Sister Yi have long since entered the palace. No one is here to see your pitiful act. The sun is just right. You shall stand in the courtyard for 3 hours as a lesson, and think carefully about how to serve your mistress properly. Yuing raised her voice in alarm. This won't do. The one in the west courtyard is the one His Highness holds most dear. Smack. Shuerilan's willow leaf eyebrows shot up, and she slapped Yuing across the face. A mere woman from the pleasure quarters. What kind of most dear is she? My Shui family is the foremost household in the capital. How could I not have the right to punish her? Yuing, covering her face, continued to persuade. I know you and the crown princess are as close as sisters, but her life is already difficult. If His Highness gets angry, Shuerilan curled her lips disdainfully. You are all as timid as mice. Which is why the crown princess is looked down upon by a mere concubine who isn't even considered half a master. If the master suffers, the servants suffer too. If sister is trampled upon by those from the west courtyard, what good will it do any of you? Several maids and servants nodded in agreement. their gazes toward me growing more hostile. Not to mention them, if I hadn't accidentally learned of Qi Ke's scheming, I would have certainly thought that Shui Yilan was venting anger on behalf of Yi Qingshuang, attributing her provocations to Yi Qingshuang's account. The sunlight shifted from gentle to scorching, and the courtyard was filled with various types of orchids, their fragrance making my mind feel sticky and muddled. I pinched my palm, focusing my gaze on a single point, desperately trying not to faint in the east courtyard. The east courtyard was elegant and simple, except for the many playful paper cuttings abruptly pasted on the windows: goldfish, magpies, pairs of flying swallows. I squinted my eyes. The cutting techniques and structure of those paper cuttings felt inexplicably familiar. Yuying, worried that I might exaggerate things when reporting to Qi Ke, secretly fanned me when no one was around. I heard the crown princess grew up in the military camp as a child, yet she still knows how to do such delicate work, I said, nodding toward the paper cuttings on the window. Ah, it was just Miss Yilan fooling around with scissors, but the crown princess treasures them so much she stuck them all up. Yuying replied with an apologetic smile. When the crown princess first returned to the capital, only Miss Yilan treated her kindly, so the crown princess was exceptionally good to her as well. After the Shui family was expelled from the capital, the crown princess continuously sent her gold, silver, and fine belongings, but today, she truly acted on her own accord. Please don't hold a grudge against the crown princess, she had always been straightforward. Yet these words were spoken with hesitation and concealment. Orchids, paper cuttings, a bond like sisters, the Yi family's petition for an imperial marriage back then, Yi Qingshuang's indifference towards Qi Ke. An absurd conjecture slowly began to surface. Could it be Yi Qingshuang? Oh Yi Qingshuang, you still don't realize that the person you've thrown yourself into this game for has already plotted with your husband to devour you whole. A cold, clear voice sounded behind me. Yuying. What is the meaning of this? Qi Ke and Yi Qingshuang returned to the mansion early, yet Shui Yilan showed not a hint of urgency. She leisurely changed into another pale green silk dress, looking delicate and captivating as the early spring breeze brushed against her. Seeing me standing awkwardly in the east courtyard following the rules, Qi Ke was about to lose his temper, but upon seeing her, half of his anger dissipated. The bewildered Yi Qingshuang couldn't help but get distracted. Her ears turning red, I watched with a cold eye, and my suspicion turned into fact. Affection between women is considered a disgraceful affair in respectable families, but in the world of brothels, it is nothing new. The courtesan who taught me had once served the daughter of a wealthy family. I steadied my mind and came up with a bold plan. Your Highness, please don't blame my sister, Shui Yilan said righteously, shielding Yi Qingshuang. A concubine who disrespects the mistress deserves punishment. Shouldn't the crown princess be the one to decide matters of the inner household? Damn it. This was a direct challenge to Yi Qingshuang's authority over household management. Qi Ke immediately understood and put on a stern face. Qingshuang, it was I who said Ziyun need not come to pay respects. Are you taking it out on her because you resent me? I thought you were truly magnanimous and kind. But it turns out it's all an act, one face in public, another in private. Your temperament is unfit for the role of the Eastern Palace's steward. Ziyun. Seizing the moment, I let my eyes roll back and collapsed softly, at Yi Qingshuang's feet. Crown Princess, I gasped weakly, my hands fumbling up Yi Qingshuang's skirt before clutching her thigh desperately. I must have offended Miss Shui in some way. She said she would take advantage of your highness and the crown princess being away at the palace to teach me some manners. This humble servant's body is of little worth. A bit of physical punishment is nothing. Please, your highness and crown princess, do not argue with our guest on my account. I was fully aware of the wretched state I was in at that moment. Such a flirtatious manner. Yi Qingshuang was startled, the slight blush on the tips of her ears spreading across her entire face. She hurriedly helped me up, brushed the dust off my clothes, and shot Shui Yilan a slightly reproachful look. Yet, in the end, she didn't follow my lead to explain. TSK, Yi Qingshuang thought Shui Yilan was standing up for her, afraid that she would be punished by Qi Ke, and intended to take the blame herself. That won't do. I secretly kicked Yuying and winked at her. Yuying knelt down with a thud, trembling as she said, as soon as your highness and the crown princess left, Miss Yilan ordered Ziyun to be summoned, saying that a woman of her background was unworthy of raising the crown prince's eldest son, and that the entire East Wing was cowardly, insisting she stand for 3 hours to show us. Yuying was no less skilled than Shui Yilan at getting straight to the point. The servants inside and outside the courtyard grew increasingly indignant as they listened. An outsider, as a guest, was now meddling in the affairs of the Eastern Palace. Even presuming to act on behalf of the Crown Princess, even Chi-Ku could no longer maintain his composure. Yi Qingshuang stared in astonishment, her eyes wide, as if she couldn't believe these words had come from Shuilan. "No, I didn't, I never said that, you're slandering me, you wretched wench." Shuilan flusteredly tugged at Yi Qingshuang one moment, then sidled up to Chi-Ku the next. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, Chi-Ku's frown deepened. Enough. Miss Shui should spend more time accompanying her esteemed teacher and less time wandering around the inner quarters. As for the Crown Princess, you have failed in managing your subordinates. Reflect on your mistakes behind closed doors for 2 months. Yueying shall have her salary suspended for a year. Before his words had fully settled, he took Shuilan by the arm and stormed off in a huff. As Yueying poured tea for me, she grumbled indignantly. It was clearly Miss Elan's fault. What does the Crown Princess have to reflect on? Yi Qingshuang shot a glance over and silenced Yueying's complaints. "I'm sorry, Elan can be a bit spoiled and willful. I apologize for the trouble she caused you." Yi Qingshuang offered a sincere apology, raising her teacup as if it were a wine glass. I gently swirled the tea in my cup and said softly, "The one who should be apologizing to you and me is probably someone else." I vividly recounted the solemn vows of love exchanged between the Crown Prince and Shuilan. Yi Qingshuang's hand gripping the teacup tightened more and more, her thin lips trembling. "Impossible, Elan didn't tell me that. You can't wake someone who is pretending to sleep, but to survive, I must wake her." I took the poetry collection from my bosom and spread it open before her eyes. "The paper-cut portrait in your Highness's book seems to be from the same hand as the one on your window." When his position as Crown Prince was hanging by a thread, no one dared to cross him, yet the Yi family stepped forward to offer help in times of need. "Let me guess, your father might have done it for the stability of the nation. But you, could it be for Shuilan?" Yi Qingshuang stared fixedly at the small portrait, as if her soul had been snatched away. "Only if Chi-Ku ascends the throne will he overturn the case and clear Lord Shui's name. If you become the Empress, it will be even more helpful to this matter. After marriage, if he favors his concubines, it will only be to your advantage, not your detriment. After all, he isn't the one you truly love." I deliberately paused, and Yi Qingshuang's face instantly turned deathly pale. "I actually bet right." Glancing at the sky, I changed the subject. "But the one you love is currently beneath your husband." Yi Qingshuang suddenly covered her ears. "Stop it, I don't believe it." Realizing her slip of the tongue, she flusteredly corrected herself. "No, I don't understand what you're saying." I suppressed my smile, stood up, and took my leave. "Go to the side door of the Hall of Diligent Governance a few times, and you'll understand once you send Yueying." Yet more than 10 days passed, and the eastern courtyard remained quiet, as if I had never visited that day. Could it be that Yueying was useless and missed the mark? "Why haven't I seen Yueying for several days?" I asked Baoyang. She held Yuan in her arms, playing with the parrot under the corridor, and replied, "She goes every day to invite Miss Shui to keep the Crown Princess company. But the Shui family's son and daughter-in-law left last month. Miss Shui always says she's too busy attending to the sick and can't get away." Ah. Yi Qingshuang still wants to ask Shuilan for a clear explanation. Truly, she won't give up until she reaches the Yellow River. "Oh, and His Highness," I said casually. Baoyan's expression flickered with unease for a moment, and she answered vaguely, busy with official matters, I suppose. He'll probably come to see you once he's done." She tugged at her sleeve, covering a jade bracelet that hadn't been there the day before. Baoyang had been sold into the Eastern Palace by her elder brother. Her family was so poor they couldn't even lift the lid off the cooking pot, and her brothers relied on her monthly wages to get by. When Chi-Ku brought me back to the capital, fearing gossip and knowing my status as an insignificant concubine carried little weight, I kept only the most enthusiastic Baoyang and dismissed the other maids and servants. When Yuan was born, she was even more overjoyed than I was. If you could just climb a little higher, he might become the crown prince of this dynasty in the future. She gleefully held Yua tightly, refusing to let go. I was so startled that I ignored the pain from my wound and rushed to cover her mouth. If there is a legitimate heir, he is to be established. Only in the absence of one is the eldest son considered. If these words were to spread, would outsiders laugh at me, a woman of humble origins, for dreaming of becoming empress, or would they accuse me of cursing Yi Qingshuang for being unable to bear a son? I don't mind Baoyang serving me wholeheartedly because I'm favored. But if she starts to flatter the powerful and bully the weak when I fall out of favor, I must be cautious. Your Highness, weren't you? How did you get here? Baoyang looked at the courtyard gate in surprise. Hastily putting down Yuana, Chi-Ku, whom I hadn't seen for days, stepped into the hall. The smell of alcohol hitting us head-on, he leaned his whole body on me, and it took both Baoyang and me dragging and pulling to lay him down on the bed, with my mentor stepping in. He finally managed to persuade the stubborn old, imperial, guards, he mumbled, the corners of his mouth unable to suppress a smile. Go brew a bowl of sobering soup, make it strong. I sent Baoyang away. Chi-Ku rambled on by himself. After this is done, the merit of supporting the new emperor will be your family's. I'll make you a noble consort. Even the empress, who would dare say no. His eyes were bleary with drink, and he gently caressed my face as if holding something fragile and precious. My chest felt as if heavy stones were piled upon it, making it hard to breathe. The you he referred to was naturally Heroine, not me, who by then would already be a dead man. And what about the crown princess, your concubines, and your son? I took a deep breath and asked, unwilling to give up. Chi-Ku waved his hand dismissively. The military power of the Yi family will eventually fall into my hands. She married for the sake of her family's alliance, so she should bear the consequences. As for Ziyun, his eyes flickered. The servant girl Baoyang in her courtyard will force her to drink a bowl of infertility potion on the night of the uprising, claiming it was a calming tonic swapped by Lady Yi, so I can hold Lady Yi accountable. After all, she is the mother of my eldest son, and she is ignorant. I'm merely allowing her and our son to have a place to live in the palace. Why must you be jealous of her? During the day, I laughed at Yi Qingshuang for being unable to let go. If I could let go, why would I have asked that unnecessary question? He took my hand and brought it to his lips, giving it a light, fleeting kiss. I recoiled as if scorched by fire, pulling back abruptly. Chi-Ku was taken aback, shaking his head vigorously to get a clearer look at the person before him. A clamor arose in the courtyard. His Highness clearly said he was going to the study to sober up first. How could he have ended up here on his own? You must have used some underhanded trick. Shuerilans made accused aggressively. Baoyang dared not disturb Chika, whispering, what nonsense are you talking? As an outsider, how can you meddle in where His Highness goes? Shuerilans maid sneered, our master, the young lady, and several old acquaintances are waiting in the front hall to discuss matters with His Highness. How can I not have a say? It wasn't until I opened the door that she reluctantly fell silent. I took the soup bowl from Baoyang and said to the maid, go and deliver the message. His Highness is resting here with me. Any matters can be discussed tomorrow. The maid bit her lip, not daring to argue with me in the end, and retreated with a huff after a curtsy. Baoyang spat in her direction and muttered under her breath, just wait till we're together someday, I'll show you who's in charge. I pretended not to hear and turned to remind her, by the way, the crown princess's jade orchid is about to bloom. Keep an eye on Yua and make sure she doesn't go near it. Baoyang nodded, her eyes shifting almost imperceptibly. Love that ends without a cause is always hard to let go, but time waits for no one. I have to give Yi Qingshuang a push, however, since Chi-Ku intended to make me drink the infertility potion. Did he change his mind later, or was it someone else who wanted my life? I stared at the hangover soup in my hand, lost in thought. When I woke up, Chi-Ku was nowhere to be seen, along with him. Baoyang had also vanished. My mind raced, and I quickly picked up Yuan and knocked on the door of the east courtyard. Yi Qingshuang did not refuse to see me, but she was unwilling to talk about Shuerilan. Instead, she idly played a game of chess with me. Her chess skills were exceptional. While mine were just a few amateur tricks I had learned to pass the time with patrons, every game ended with me utterly defeated. Don't lose heart, let's play again, she said with a faint smile. Her face showing the liveliness appropriate for her age for the first time. Our young lady's chess skills are unmatched even among the generals, Yuing said proudly. Chess and military strategy are interconnected. The Duke himself said it's a pity she wasn't born a man, or she would surely have achieved great deeds and left her name in history. Yi Qingshuang's eyes darkened slightly as she silently rearranged the chessboard. Yuana, leaning by the couch, chirped brightly, then you can keep being the empress, and let my mother be the imperial consort. I'll help you achieve great things. Alright, little ancestor. I swiftly stuffed a pastry into his mouth. Yi Qingshuang was stunned. What did you say, a 2-year-old child, talking nonsense? I scoffed with a laugh, just as Yi Qingshuang was about to ask more. The courtyard gate suddenly rattled with urgent knocking. A servant stood outside with a pained expression and reported, Your Highness, your jade orchid is dying. His Highness asks you to come and take a look. When Yi Qingshuang and I arrived in the garden one after the other, Shuerilan was whispering quietly to Chi-Ku. Chi-Ku, upon seeing us, cleared his throat lightly and subtly distanced himself from Shuerilan. Yi Qingshuang paid no attention and quickly walked to the flower field. Only to find that the bouquets that were still in bud yesterday had all been uprooted, lifeless. Shuerilan moved close to her and said urgently, I wanted to see how the jade orchid my sister gave me was growing, but found it had been ruined like this, so I quickly called for His Highness and my sister to come. Yi Qingshuang turned a deaf ear, bending down to pick up and examine each plant one by one. With each plant she set down, her expression darkened a little more. It's her. The maid who had argued with Baoyang the day before suddenly pointed at Yuan. She was caught red-handed destroying the jade orchid before, and she must have held a grudge. Several servants attending to Shuerilan also stiffened their necks, claiming that Yuan had destroyed the flower field. Qi Ku's gaze swept past me and landed on Baoyang. You're from the west courtyard, you tell me. Baoyang twisted the corner of her clothes, speaking vaguely. I haven't seen either of the masters all day, I don't know where they went. Shuerilan's maid affirmed with certainty. That's it then, I saw this mother and son sneaking into the garden at noon. Yi Qingshuang's eyes were sharp as lightning. Noon? The maid shrank her neck at her question. Or in the afternoon, anyway, I saw it. Shuerilan stepped over the crooked flower branches and pulled Yi Qingshuang up. I understand that you don't want to argue with a concubine. But today she not only slapped me in the face, but also slapped you. She must be severely punished. I looked at Baoyang behind Shuerilan, her lips were tightly pressed, and as soon as our eyes met, she immediately looked away. Even if I could find 10 or 8 people to testify for me and Yua, it wouldn't be as convincing as a single word from Baoyang, who serves closely. Moreover, the one upholding justice here was never here for my justice in the first place. If it weren't for the fact that Yuan and I had spent the entire day playing chess with Yi Qingshuang, we would have no way to clear our names even with 100 mouths. Yi Qingshuang stared at Shuerilan, as if something in her eyes was shattering piece by piece. Yuing stepped forward to defend me, but Yi Qingshuang raised her hand to stop her. Shuerilan kept urging, Sister, such a narrow-minded and malicious person should no longer serve His Highness, even if she isn't driven out. She should never be allowed to become a concubine or consort for life. Qi Ku had always stood aloof from the disputes in the inner household. Hearing this, he paused for a moment and interjected, She has made a mistake this time. Let her copy scriptures in the ancestral hall to reflect on her faults, there's no need to punish her for life. Yi Qingshuang finally withdrew her gaze from Shuerilan's face and said to me solemnly, You heard what His Highness said. Go to the Buddha hall and copy the scriptures 1,000 times. Do not come out even if you are 1 copy short. You have failed in teaching your child. Yuan will stay in the east courtyard for now. When you are capable of being a proper mother, you may raise him again. Shuerilan's sullen expression eased slightly only when she heard that Yuan was being taken away. I cooperatively wailed in sorrow, but couldn't squeeze out any tears, so I had to lower my head and cover my face. Yuana didn't understand why, but she cried with genuine emotion. I was happy to hide in the Buddha hall for a few days of peace and quiet. However, before midnight, 3 people had already come. First, Baoyang. I haven't seen the girl all day. I was terrified. I didn't mean to say that. She begged for my forgiveness with tears and a runny nose. After finally managing to send her away, before I could finish copying the scripture once, the door was pushed open again. It's so cold in here. Qi Ku frowned and said, I'll have someone bring a thick quilt, he said, rubbing my hands. Just copy a few pages casually. Don't take what you said seriously. I lowered my eyelashes, copying stroke by stroke. Where is Yuan? Qi Ku was silent for a moment. Lady Yi will not mistreat him. And I will also send someone to keep an eye on him. Nothing will go wrong. So he won't be sent back, I whispered softly. Is it because my background is disgraceful, or are they letting others take their anger out on us? Qi Ku's face darkened. What do you mean by that? I looked up. After all, from day until now, Your Highness hasn't once asked whether it was me or Yuan who did it. The concern in Qi Ku's eyes vanished completely. Does it matter? He said indifferently. His gaze at me no different from how he looked at Baoyang, Yueying, or a flower or a tree. You and Yuana have come this far today, all thanks to my special leniency. You should know your place. Some grievances are unavoidable. After years together, I finally heard a sincere word. After all, in his heart, I am nothing but a stray cat or dog. But the esteemed crown prince doesn't know that stray cats and dogs, tired of freezing and starving, will stop at nothing for warmth and a full belly. I chuckled self-deprecatingly and closed the door that Qi Ku had left wide open as he stormed off. I had only copied 2 pages when the paper was swept to the floor by a howling gust of wind. Yuing slipped in through the door like a furtive shadow. She laid out a table full of pastries and warm porridge. Sighing deeply, the crown princess set the garden ablaze and tore all the paper cuttings from the windows to shreds. I rubbed my sore wrist. It was worth luring Heroine into crying thief. Heroine had long held a grudge against me, a few days ago. When Chiku slipped from under her watch and stayed overnight in the west courtyard, she must have been both shocked and furious. Her only hope to return to the capital, resume her life of luxury, and even ascend to the Phoenix throne was Chiku. To achieve this, she did not hesitate to exploit Yi Qingxuang's hidden feelings for her, delivering the entire Yi family into Chiku's hands, since Heroine entered the Eastern Palace. Chiku has kept her by his side day and night. What faintly unsettled her was likely only me, a woman of the pleasure quarters who took advantage of the situation while she and Chiku were separated by distance. Since Baoyang had become Chiku's inside informant, knowing that I would become a discarded woman without children or favor, she rushed to curry favor with Heroine, after being moved by my words. She offered a plan to destroy the jade orchids and provoke Yi Qingxuang into conflict with me. Heroine understood better than anyone how much Yi Qingxuang cherished those jade orchids, and she would gladly accept this plan. Chiku would also turn a blind eye. She and Chiku were acting, and so were Yi Qingxuang and I. But what I aimed for was to let Yi Qingxuang witness her own sincere devotion being trampled into the mud by the one she loved. I haven't told her the other big matter yet. Two grasshoppers tied to one rope must work together. There's no one outside now, miss. Please come with me to the east courtyard to have a word with the crown princess, Yueying whispered softly, pointing to the stack of rice paper in front of me. I excused myself. Let's keep up the act fully. We can talk about it in a few days. I felt somewhat guilty towards Yi Qingxuang in my heart. She had tended to that whole garden of jade orchids tirelessly from autumn to spring, rain or shine. For over half a year. Moreover, she is as sharp as ice and snow. She must have already caught on to what's going on. Yueying came to urge me time and again, patiently waiting for me to finish copying a stack of scriptures. Now His Highness and Miss Xue don't even bother hiding it anymore. Many maids and servants have run into the two of them. She said with disdain. I calculated the timing. In Yuana's so-called previous life, Yi Qingxuang should have only realized by now, belatedly, that Heroine's affections were insincere, but perhaps it was Heroine's sweet talk, or perhaps it was her avoidance. By the time she suddenly awoke to the fact that she had been played like a pawn, it was already too late to turn things around. This time is different. The candlelight in the prayer hall dimmed, and I trimmed the tangled wick, gazing at the pale sky outside the window. I even felt a slight anticipation for the night when I would bleed from all 7 orifices. Rebellion. Yi Qingxuang repeated in a daze. I didn't mention Yue's talk of rebirth, only telling him about his dream talk and the conversations between Chiku, Han Li, and Heroine. Why did you only tell me today? Yi Qingxuang asked, half believing and half doubting. I answered honestly. How was I supposed to know which side you're on? What if you obeyed Heroine in everything? Wouldn't I be walking right into the lion's den? Her cheeks flushed crimson, and she cleared her throat, saying, "This matter is of great importance. I must inform my father." Yi Qingxuang swiftly drafted a coded report that was unintelligible to others, yet hesitated to put the final stroke to it. The imperial father and son are at odds. I'm putting my father in a difficult position, she said, tapping her forehead in distress. His Majesty has long been wary of the Yi family's military achievements and prestige, but with the border in turmoil, he has no choice but to appoint father to lead the Western campaign. Moreover, His Majesty has been ill for a long time without recovery. If my family gets involved in this matter, helping either side would only bring trouble. I didn't understand these things and said anxiously, "Then are you willing to become a deposed empress as soon as you enter the palace, watching your family decline for the rest of your life? Or, does your father want to take his place?" Yi Qingxuang looked up in alarm. Don't speak recklessly. The Yi family has been loyal for 3 generations, without a single traitor among us. Moreover, with foreign threats looming large, internal strife at court is bound to lead to disaster. I paced around the room like an ant on a hot pan. Are we just supposed to wait for death and watch the Xue family reap the benefits? When the snipe and the clam fight, the fisherman profits. I stopped in my tracks. How about your family playing the fisherman? After a moment's thought, she understood what I meant. On the night of the uprising, a small contingent of the Western Expedition Army stealthily surrounded the capital, unnoticed by gods or ghosts. At the break of dawn, the old emperor in the palace abdicated, and the crown prince ascended the throne with tears in his eyes, as the morning sun rose as usual. As for why the Western Expedition Army came, It was naturally on the new sovereign's orders to purge the rebels, with the dead bodies of loyalists strewn across the outskirts of the capital serving as evidence. The Shui family are the rebels. A black piece fell from my hand onto the center of the chessboard. Yi Qingshuang stared at the chess piece, her eyelashes fluttering slightly. Old Shui was originally only permitted by His Majesty to come to the capital alone for medical treatment, she said abruptly, but Elan wrote to me, saying she was concerned about my old injury. Yi Qingshuang gave a bitter smile and pulled down her collar, revealing a terrifying scar. The scar meandered from her chin down to her chest, though it was concealed with lead powder and not very noticeable from a distance. My mother passed away early, and I was raised by my father, always by his side, she murmured. The military life was harsh. This scar is from that time. Later, my father discovered that I had no interest in men but instead in women. He flew into a rage and sent me back to the capital, demanding that I settle down and learn to be a virtuous wife and mother. The noble ladies in the capital laughed at my coarseness and scorned my ugly scars. Only Elan treated me with kindness, and she even said, she and I were the same, but in the 63 days she's been here, she has never once mentioned my old scars. Her voice gradually faded to a mosquito-like whisper, only her fingers still lingeringly caressed the black stone on the board. My eyelids twitched uncontrollably. Yi Qingshuang was naive about matters of love. Perhaps she thought of herself as a shameful freak, while Shui Elan was the rare warmth she had ever known in her life. I had no time to wait for her to slowly heal from her heartbreak, with only a little over 20 days left until the uprising. If her letter isn't sent out tonight, I'm afraid the Western Expedition Army won't make it in time to provide support. The courtyard was utterly silent, even the moonlight guarding the gate seemed to be dozing off. I pursed my lips. I've seen plenty of people in the brothel who were heartbroken and desperate over misplaced affections. Women of the pleasure quarters may not excel in other skills, but they have 1,000 ways to make one forget their worries. I extinguished the candle flame with a wave, one hand cradling the nape of her neck. The chessboard was pushed askew, black pieces clattering away into obscurity. The kiss left her lips, tracing the shape of a remembered scar, wandering in delicate, intricate paths. The other hand followed the gentle curves, rising and falling. As the slender body in my arms gradually ceased to tremble, the dripping sound under the eaves was faint, almost imperceptible, as the last of the snow melted, trickling into slender streams of spring water. The lamp has gone out, I'll fetch another one. Ying pushed the door open with a creak. Yi Qingshuang held her breath, while I rose leisurely. The old wick has blackened, it's time for a new one. Wait, Yi Qingshuang called out to me in a soft voice. The Yi family can easily suppress the Shui family in the capital, but if Qi Ku endures the humiliation for now, he will surely join forces with others to retaliate in the future. We need a long-term strategy. I straightened the golden hairpin in her hair, leaned in, and said, he has no future. The lofty crown prince, who once forced me to drink a bowl of infertility medicine, had already shown me extraordinary mercy. It forced me to think quickly in a moment of desperation. The scents of contraceptive decoctions, abortifacient brews, and sterilization potions have lingered for years in the red light districts. Every household has a few prescriptions, and it's common for newly arrived young girls to spend their days squatting in the kitchen brewing these medicines. The most toxic among them is the sterilization potion. It's called a sterility potion, but in reality, it damages the internal organs, causing rapid weakness and decline in both men and women, naturally rendering them unable to bear children. Some people with poor health might not survive more than a year or so after drinking a single bowl. It's mostly used by the cheapest brothels for convenience. That night, I poured out the hangover soup Bao Yang had brought and replaced it with the sterility potion, feeding it sip by sip to the drunken Qi Ku, when suddenly I remembered how he had once fed me medicine in the same way when we first met. If you hadn't managed to keep your position as the crown prince and had instead stayed in Xuanyang as a carefree prince, what would our lives be like now? I wiped the medicine from the corner of his lips. Unfortunately, there are no IFS. Han Li came more and more frequently, and Qi Ku spent increasingly longer periods away from home. Yi Qingshuang was still confined to self-reflection, and Yuana remained quietly in the eastern courtyard. I let bygones be bygones with Bao Yang, and the two of us harbored our own thoughts in the western courtyard. The peaceful days passed one by one, and by the time I realized there were a few unfamiliar faces in the rear residence, the night that was bound to come had quietly arrived. The drums struck the third watch, and the moon hung high in the sky. Tonight, for some reason, it was unusually quiet, making the sound of footsteps in the courtyard especially noticeable. The door opened silently on both sides, and a pale green embroidered shoe stepped in first. I slightly raised my eyes and met the newcomer's gaze. Heroine stood gracefully in the hall, a triumphant smile playing on her lips. Beside her was Baoyang, holding a tray, followed by two stout and sturdy maids. Miss Ziyun, since you already have a child to rely on, drinking this bowl of infertility potion won't be a loss for you. Baoyang tremblingly offered the tray to me. Miss Shui and His Highness are deeply in love, and will have to live under her authority from now on. I lowered my head to sniff it, then looked at Heroine. This isn't a contraceptive soup, is it? Her smile froze, and she scowled. Stop the nonsense and drink it quickly. I sighed. You took it upon yourself to swap the sterility soup given by His Highness for a throat-sealing poison. If he asks, are you planning to pin the blame on Baoyang? Baoyang was horrified. Her legs went weak, and she fell to the ground along with the bowl. You fool! Heroine's eyes widened in anger, her embroidered shoe landing repeatedly on Baoyang. Go get another bowl at once. Baoyang sobbed and dodged. I don't dare. I thought it was just a fertility-ending potion. Heroine let out a cold snort. What if it killed you? You don't actually think you hold any weight in his heart, do you? In a few hours, His Highness will become His Majesty. I am the childhood sweetheart who suffered for him, and my father is the meritorious minister who helped him rise to power. What are you, a courtesan who sells smiles? You'll only taint his bed and dirty the green bricks of the harem. Your son must also yield his position. My child will sooner or later be the legitimate eldest son. A maid, panting, brought another bowl of medicinal soup. Open her mouth and pour it in, Heroine said lazily. Then what about me? What am I? A slender figure emerged from behind the screen. Heroine gasped as if she had seen a ghost in broad daylight. Sister Yi, she forced an expression that was neither a cry nor a laugh. How could you be at this lowly servant's place? You said that once I become the Empress and His Majesty clears the Shui family's name, you would enter the palace as a female official, never marrying and staying with me for life. Yi Qingshuang said faintly. Why then do you speak of your child being the legitimate eldest son? Heroine's face shifted through a range of emotions, finally letting out a dry laugh. Qi Ku and I have shared a bond since childhood. And my family was even punished because of him. If not for this misfortune, the position of crown princess and the future role of empress would have always been mine. I did deceive you, but I only wanted to increase Qi Ku's chances of ascending the throne. As for him wanting the Yi family to hand over their military power, you can't blame me for that. Sister, after all, we are women. The proper path for us is to learn to be virtuous wives and mothers. Supporting our husbands and raising our children. Heroine softened her tone. If you obediently return, I will persuade Qi Ku to spare you and the Yi family. Yi Qingshuang's eyes were as dark as ink, and she remained completely still. Are you determined to help this wretched servant? Heroine shrieked. The sound of footsteps outside the courtyard grew closer, and before Heroine could react, a group of tall soldiers in military attire surged into the yard. Heroine stared blankly at these people, whose attire was completely different from that of the Eastern Palace Guards and the Imperial Forest Army. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. Captain Yi has surrounded the Imperial City, and the rebels stationed in the outskirts of the capital have all been eliminated. The person at the front cupped his hands and reported to Yi Qingshuang. Captain Yi must be Yi Qingshuang's cousin. She had previously said that the Duke of Su had replied that generals should not return to the capital without authorization. So she sent her cousin to lead some elite troops instead. Good, leave half the men to guard the place, the rest follow me into the palace. Yi Qing brushed past Heroine, who was as dry as a fish, and shoved a token into my hand. Hold on to this, they will all follow your orders. Oh, I can't do it. I kept pushing her hand away. All my life, I've been nothing but a plaything to amuse others. How could I possibly command anyone? She laughed. Just as she had when she had checkmated me 300 times in our chess games. Only if you succeed can you and grow up healthy, achieve great deeds, and leave behind a legacy of assisting the two Empress Dowagers in harmony. I clutched the token tightly, sitting in the courtyard with bated breath, ignoring the people locked inside the house as their shouts of anger turned to sobs and pleas. The capital outside the rear residence was still a peaceful night, no different from usual. Until the break of dawn in the east, the gate of the Eastern Palace was knocked upon by a dozen or so people, dressed in the same attire as the soldiers Yi Qingshuang had left me. Upon seeing the token, they immediately bowed deeply to the ground. The matter is settled. The Crown Princess requests the young lady and the little prince to enter the palace. Moon Shadow hurriedly took Yuana into her arms, and I, holding him close, was escorted onto horseback. Passing through one unfamiliar street and alley after another, some early risers, yawning as they removed their shop shutters, curiously glanced at the woman and young child surrounded by soldiers, only to shrink back in fear at a sharp shout. The majestic city tower appeared ahead, with its upturned eaves and corners resembling a palace in the heavens. One heavy door after another slowly opened, each guarded by soldiers in full armor, all of whom bowed respectfully at the token in my hand. Such a small token, yet so powerful, I muttered. The officer beside me chuckled. Military orders are as unyielding as mountains. A single small token was all it took to turn 3,000 elite soldiers outside the capital into a sea of blood. The pitch-black token suddenly felt like a hot potato in my hand, and I nearly flung it away. That madwoman Yi Qingshuang, how dare she give me something so crucial? The sweat in my palm dampened the token, a strange sensation spreading from my palm, tingling and numbing, reaching through my limbs and body. So the men we fought over in the brothel, even the celestial-like crown prince, what we were really contending for was this, a word that carries the weight of 9 tripods, the power to grant life or death, boundless power that even fame and fortune are driven by. I ran my fingertip over the token, feeling the distinct chill of metal, yet it felt more irresistible to the touch than the finest pearls, jade, gold, or silver I had ever handled. After climbing countless steps, I finally stepped breathlessly into the opulent Hall of Supreme Harmony. The Imperial Guards were all subdued by the Western Expedition Army. Old Shui knelt trembling like a sieve among the sword-wielding soldiers, with a bloody, mangled head resembling Han Li beside his knees. Qi Ku and Yi Qingshuang stood separately at the corners of the empty Imperial throne. I couldn't remember how many days had passed since I last saw Qi Ku. But he looked much more haggard than before, with even a few white hairs at his temples. To ensure absolute certainty, I had administered an extremely potent sterilizing drug. The Western Expedition Army will withdraw immediately, and I promise you the position of Empress. I will not go back on my word. Qi Ku clenched his fists and said through gritted teeth. Yi Qingshuang replied respectfully, the Western Expedition Army will naturally obey the order to withdraw. But what I just discussed with your majesty was how to deal with the Shui faction rebels, not the position of Empress. Qi Ku's eyes widened in fury as he lowered his voice. Aren't you and Elan close friends? Must you drive her to utter ruin? You as Empress, her as consort? No, as Jiyu, Jowie, or even Baolin, is that not enough? Yi Qingshuang raised her head and declared clearly, what are you saying? An army must have a just cause for action. The Western Expedition Army came to the capital to suppress the rebels. How has it become me driving the Shui family to ruin? If the Shui family are not rebels, then who are? Old Shui was so frightened that he lost his wits and suddenly cried out in a loud voice, Your Highness, I did it all for you. The assassins in the outskirts of the capital have nothing to do with me. Captain Yi, quick with his hands, knocked him out with the hilt of his sword. Exactly, if he doesn't take the blame for this. Would Qi Ku have to admit to rebellion himself? Qi Ku's gaze was dark and gloomy. After a long while, he said, Very well, the Shui family has committed treason and their crimes are unforgivable. But Elan was not involved in any of this. She should at least be spared her life. Yi Qingshuang looked hesitant and turned her gaze toward me. A noble lady from a prestigious family would not understand that, in many cases, death is actually a release. I gave a silent look of approval. And Yi Qingshuang nodded. Qi Ku collapsed to the ground as if all strength had left him, and the eunuchs and palace maids around him hurriedly helped him into the inner hall. The world cannot be without a ruler for a single day. The coronation ceremony was held after the entire family of the rebellious faction was executed. The Empress enthronement ceremony took place on the same day, along with the conferment of imperial consorts. Yi Qingshuang, of course, became the Empress of the Central Palace. I was conferred as the virtuous consort, while a dazed woman named Jiang Lana was made a lady of bright deportment. However, Qi Ku's condition deteriorated sharply after his ascension to the throne. He often suffered from dizziness or excruciating bone pain, making it frequently impossible for him to attend court. The imperial physicians always shook their heads with profound secrecy. Unable to prescribe a cure, with no other options, the court ministers had to assist. And the Empress temporarily handled state affairs. Yuana was sent to the Imperial Academy, only coming to spend time with me during her leisure hours. On a calm and sunny afternoon, Yi Qingshuang, exhausted, rested her head on a desk piled with documents, while I stood beneath the corridor of the central palace, gazing at the mirror-like surface of the Tay Lake, lamenting the dull and tedious days. Out of the corner of my eye, I caught a figure sneaking into the Emperor's bedchamber. It was Heroine, who was not permitted to wander freely. Oh, now she's called Jianglana. I had almost forgotten this person was still in the palace. On a whim, I followed quietly, hushing the palace maid's greeting at the door. I tiptoed into the hall, a deliberately suppressed sob drifted out. As Jianglana choked out, "Your Majesty, that venomous woman has seized all control of the court affairs. Won't you think of a way? I can hardly protect myself. What means do I have to seize power?" Chiku's voice was hoarse, and I had to move closer to make out his words. The rustling of fabric grew louder as Jianglana said urgently, "I'll bear you a son, many, many sons. You said it yourself, only our son is worthy of ruling this land." Chiku coughed repeatedly, his voice even taking on a sob. "Calm down, it's useless, it's useless. I can no longer perform my duties, and my days are numbered." 2 days ago, when I attended to him in bed, Chiku couldn't take his eyes off the half-new, half-old lilac undergarment I was wearing. "This is the clothing you wore in Xuanyang. Why have you kept it even after becoming a consort?" he asked. I blew on the herbal soup. "Clothes are best when old, but people are best when new." Chiku propped himself up and said helplessly, "Are you hinting at me? Are you still upset about me and Lana? Her status is now lower than yours, and I've never neglected you for her sake. She's all alone and helpless. You should take better care of her." "Never neglected me for her sake." I didn't point out his original plans for the night of the incident. Does he think I'm a fool? Besides, Heroine once tried to kill me, in US Nightmare. She was indeed the reason we, mother and child, lost our lives. If it were her serving you now, and I were the one left all alone, would you also plead for me to her? I said with a half-smile. Chiku swallowed the bitter medicine in one gulp and grimaced. "So bitter, you wouldn't, even if I were bleeding from all orifices and you had died of illness in the deep palace. You would only scold her with a few words. Human affection is the most unreasonable thing. But human affection isn't all that important either. Staking one's life and future on another's affection is a gamble too high for someone as insignificant as me to afford losing." Chiku's hand caressed my hair, sliding down along the strands. His breathing was heavy, yet he remained powerless. I lay against his chest, listening to his feeble heartbeat, and sighed in relief. Chiku pinched my chin. "The imperial physicians are useless. Tomorrow, I will seek a renowned doctor from among the people. Once I recover, I'll make you beg for mercy." Jianglana was incredulous. "No, if you can't perform as a man, why keep me in the palace? How can I become empress and take revenge? If you die, will Yi Qingshuang spare me? And that Ziyun, they'll tear me to pieces." She stumbled out of the hall, letting out strange cries, seemingly shouting for her father and elder brother. The news of consort Jiang's drowning in the lake reached me just as I was preparing a birthday gift for Yi Qingshuang. The moonlight led me to the central palace, where Yi Qingshuang stood motionless under the corridor, clutching a yellowed paper-cut portrait in her palm. She turned around, wiping her eyes somewhat awkwardly, and said, "I had wanted to talk to her earlier, but I was always too busy. Since the deceased is to be honored, let her be posthumously titled as a noble consort." My heart stirred. Yuana's dream had come true in this way. Yuying hesitated for a moment and said, "And His Majesty," upon hearing the news. He was so grief-stricken that he fainted. Yi Qingshuang rubbed her temples and said impatiently, "Then summon the imperial physician. I don't know how to treat illnesses." Yuying retreated hesitantly, and I moved behind her, gently massaging her shoulders with just the right amount of pressure. "Your Highness, you bear the weight of both the court and the harem. How can just Yuying and a few inexperienced young maids take proper care of you?" Yi Qingshuang narrowed her eyes, letting out a weary sigh. "Well, isn't there still you?" I leaned in and whispered, "I only know a little, not enough to truly understand your Highness's heart." Yi Qingshuang opened her eyes somewhat confusedly. Standing gracefully before her were 4 beauties. I scoured the finest pleasure quarters in the capital to carefully select these charming ones for her. Hearing they were to serve a woman, each and every one of them was delighted. Any lingering attachment to an old love would be cast to the far ends of the earth by Yi Qingshuang after just half a cup of tea. I tactfully closed the door and stepped out. The evening glow, crimson to the point of purple, shimmered on the ripples of Tay Lake, as if nothing had ever happened. "Mother." Yuan had just finished school and came running toward me, full of excitement. "Slow down," I said, quickening my pace to meet her. "Slow down, we have a long way to go."